Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, if you did not watch my previous video on Yu-Gi-Oh! Voiceless Voice is coming to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. It has been confirmed in like we actually know that Voiceless Voice is coming because we got the ritual monster announced. So that's pretty cool. And with that in mind, and the new season upon us, I figured, hey, I'd give you a quick tier list going over some of the best decks and what to expect with the new metagame. Now, I believe this is a lot of decks, but it's not all of the decks. If there's something I'm missing, let me know down below. But yeah, we're just going to go quickly through this. Basically, Tier 1 is going to be, you can get to Master 1 very easily, very quickly. Tier 2 is, you can get to Master 1 fairly easily. It may take a little bit more time and a little bit more effort, but overall, not really going to be that big of a deal. Tier 3 is you will get to Master 1. It's going to be maybe a bit of a struggle, but you can still get there. Rogue is going to be something that you are genuinely either going to have to be really good at the deck or have a like anti-meta type strategy and just kind of like hit the right decks to really get to Master 1. And everything else is probably not going to get to Master 1. Maybe. If you're good enough. But probably not. And yeah, so let's just hop right into this. Starting here with Labyrinth. Oh my gosh, there are so many Fiendsmiths in here. Sorry, don't worry. It's fine. Starting off here with Labyrinth, which this is the first time I'm genuinely going to put Lab in Tier 2. Two reasons. One, I think the metagame, due to Voiceless Voice, is going to get significantly stronger, which Labyrinth hasn't really gotten anything, and I don't know if we're going to get any of the traps. None of the traps that like we kind of need for Labyrinth to do well have been announced, so because of that, I really don't think Lab is going to be the end-all be-all. However, I'm going to say this right now, Lab is like the top of Tier 2. It's still very, very good. You can still easily get to Master 1 with it. Not easily, but like you can still get to Master 1 with it. In a best-of-1 metagame, Lab is just very good. Not every player is prepared for Lab's playstyle. They're not all prepared to play against like control decks. And while Ash is still really prevalent, so is Max C, and you don't really care about Max C, so that's a benefit. So yeah, overall, like Lab is still good. Next up, we have Branded Chimera, which I just don't believe is all that great. It's okay, but you're basically losing a lot of the power that Branded brings you, while also losing like the consistency that something like Pure Chimera would even give, as well as something like Chimera Runic. So overall, I'll just put it in Rogue. I don't really think fondly or highly of the Chimera stuff. I don't think that they are all that useful in Master Duel. They're okay, right? But they oftentimes don't really do much into established boards. And more importantly is that a lot of the end boards can be played through by most of the top decks. So it's not that big of a deal. Next up, we have Centurion. Centurion's also Rogue. Centurion's okay, not great, but yeah, being able to make Crimson Dragon into a big Omni Negate as well as having the consistency of Primera, yeah, if you draw well, sure, but also you could get hand trapped once and then just die. Bestials do help, and I think Bestials will get a bit better with the Voiceless Voice introduction, so it's a little bit stronger, but it's still Rogue. Dark World is not playable. Next up, Branded. Branded's going to go in Tier 2. Branded's just very, very solid. Grass. You know, Grass exists still, so there's that. So you can play a very high roll variant. You could also play like less cards, like 50 or something like that, and still be able to play basically all of the cards that you need to. You could still... Well, I guess you can't realistically do this Gimmick Puppet Lock, but you could also just do like a Scythe Lock instead. So there's that, you know? Like, yeah, we're losing the Gimmick Puppet Lock, but that doesn't necessarily matter. I think most of the time people aren't even going for... Or, I don't know about most of the time people aren't doing that, but most of the time people don't need to do the Gimmick Puppet Lock to just kill the opponent, just because of the insane advantage that is generated if a Branded Fusion resolves. So, you know, there's that. I also have a terrible win rate against this deck. They just get super lucky. Next up, we have Dinosaur. Dinosaur's not really doing anything, let's be honest with ourselves. I'm not going to elaborate on that one. Dragon Link. Honestly, pretty underrated, I'm not going to lie. Is it crazy? Is it good? Is it as good as it was? No. But it's still decent. I believe this is Galaxy. I could be very wrong. I'm going to noted as Galaxy. Galaxy's not great. Actually, I'm going to put this lower. Where did it go? Galaxy is really bad. If you make it to Master 1 with Galaxy, let me know. Hey, props to you. You did it. But for the most part, I have rarely seen in Master Tier itself any Galaxy players. They're mostly lower ranks. It's just not that strong of a deck. It can do some things, but it does struggle to play into notable hand traps like Maxi and stuff like that. And its end boards are easily broken. Very easily broken. Its biggest boon is the fact that it gets to steal a card from the extra deck with the new continuous spell, similar to Kashtira. So there's that, but other than that, it's not really doing a whole lot. Exo Sister is, it exists. I'm actually going to put it below Centurion. I think it just is weaker than Centurion. The thing is, they both die to, like, singular hand traps, right? They can play through hand traps, right? They don't always, but they can, right? But then they also play the same amount of, like, non-engine. The only difference is, I think, the end board that this deck makes is significantly more difficult to deal with if it's uninterrupted than Exo Sister. But they kind of do the same thing. Next up, Tri Brigade, or more specifically, Fire King Tri Brigade. We're going to put that in Tier 3. Tri Brigade is pretty good. Not insane. The Fire King stuff, pretty good. Not insane, but pretty good. That's pretty much it. Next up, we have Flu. Flu is great. It's inconsistent, which is why I can't put it higher. But overall, if you do the combo, it's pretty solid. That's basically it. Flu does Flu things. We all know what Flu does, right? Next up, Hero. Hero is Rogue. Hero's good. If they play the game. But a lot of times they don't. So, there's that. But, like, I don't know. Hero has definitely fallen off as of recently. So, I probably shouldn't put it this high, but I don't know. I always think Hero is better than it probably is. But it's still really solid. It can play through a lot. You can also die to a singular hand trap, similar to a bunch of these other decks, right? But it can also play through a lot of those hand traps. The biggest issue is that it can't really play non-engine, which does matter. Kashtira is pretty weak, I'm not going to lie. Again, mostly due to consistency. If it does its combo, it does win the game a lot of the time. However, does die to singular hand traps, requires you to draw specific cards, just doesn't really play well into a lot of the top decks, It can play into, like, Snake Eyes and stuff, pretty well. Kind of gets cooked by Lab. Like, let's be honest, if Lab goes first, you're getting cooked. Right. So, not great. Not a terrible matchup, but, like, Kashtira does Kashtira things, right? If it goes first and draws Unicorn, well, that's the game. Next up, we have Voiceless Voice. Now, I mentioned this in my video where the Voiceless Voice was announced. Genuinely, this deck is going to be good. It was good in the TCG. It was like the second best deck when Snake Eyes was dominating, right? It's still dominating, let's be honest. But when it first came out, it was the second best deck right behind Snake Eyes. And Snake Eyes is significantly nerfed in Master Duel. It's not nearly as dominant as it is in the TCG. And so, I think that this deck has the potential to be the best deck. I'm going to say that it is. Even for, like, climbing in best of ones and stuff like that. And the main reason for this has to do with two things. One, it plays so very differently from a lot of decks. You don't really have the ability to hit it in the same ways. Like there's not really good overlapping cards to deal with something like Voiceless Voice as there are to deal with, like, Snake Eyes, or to deal with Labyrinth, or to deal with Branded, or to deal with something like that, right? So it's not really like a good... You're going to have a hard time fitting cards in to specifically counter something like Voiceless Voice, right? And then the second thing, it plays well into Max C. If you play well into Max C, you play well into Max C, and you're going to have a good time. Speaking of decks that don't do that, Manidium. yeah, this deck's... Look, I'm going to put it in tier 3. I've put it in Rogue a whole bunch. It's probably better. I think a whole bunch of people have been like, no, it's better, trust me. I don't think it's that good. I'm going to put it in tier 3. I'm going to trust you. But every time I see this deck, it is terrible and dies to, like, everything. So, I don't know what you guys are seeing, but I'm going to trust you. I shouldn't, but I'm going to trust you. And, yeah, we'll put it in tier 3. Mana Diem, a.k.a. Mana, a.k.a. Scareclaw, a.k.a. Vsauce Turbo. It can do stuff. Next up is Marincess. Marincess is just not that great right now. However, I wouldn't really put it in, like, everything else. It's just not that strong. It still has the ability to play the game. It still has the ability to win very easily. It has, you know, a very difficult to deal with end board. It's not, like, difficult to establish your own board through theirs, but it is difficult to out their board, which is notable. And then also, you know, potentially doing that through a whole bunch of hand traps. Next up, we have Orcus Sky. This says Orcus Sky Striker. I don't think Orcus Sky Striker is real, but we can talk about Orcus Horus, which I do believe is fairly decent. Orcus, just in general, is, like, okay, right? I think it has, like, everything at this point, except for, obviously, Nightmare Mermaid. But yeah, for the most part, like, it's decently good. And the Horus stuff adds to its consistency while also adding another axis for it to kind of play on and not really get stopped immediately by 1 or 2 cards. So that's pretty nice. Next up, we have Pearly. Pearly's great. Pearly's fantastic. Pearly does great things. Again, the issue is you got to be good at the deck, which is not, like, I don't know. I think it's not difficult, but I know that I just understand a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh concepts that don't really make sense to everyone. So there's that. But it's a good deck. A tad inconsistent, but it's super strong. Next up, we have Rescue Ace. I'm going to put Rescue Ace in fucking tier 2. I have no faith in Rescue Ace. It's just bad. It's just bad. It's, I have yet to see this deck do anything, really, in Master Duel, at the very least. It seems like it'd be, like, a very strong deck, and, like, it would have decently good end boards, but I have yet to see any of those end boards actually do anything, for the most part. They're fairly easy to chew through, especially compared to some of the other decks, right? And they also just brick so incessantly. I don't know. I've probably also not seen the best players, which is fair, but even with that being said, I'm just going to put it in tier 2. I do not have faith in this deck. I used to think that it was, like, a good deck, and I just can't anymore. Next up, we have Rika. This is technically Rika Ragnarika, which is not technically in the game, but, I mean, Rika exists. Yeah, it's a deck. It loses to the Roach, but also, like, it does what it does. It's just missing some of the new support. Overall, I don't know. I kind of want to put it, like, behind Exo Sister. I don't know. We'll put all the waifu decks right next to each other. We have Runic Furhire. Runic Furhire sucks, dude. As someone who genuinely loves this deck is ass. It's so bad. It's not good. Just don't play it. This deck is really, really fun. The problem is it really heavily relied on the Runic cards being super prevalent. And, not prevalent, but, consistent. Because if you don't have the Runic stuff, you kind of don't do anything. And so, yeah, with all of the Runic nerfs, most notably to Fountain, this deck's significantly weaker. Next up, we also have Runic Sprite, which is actually not that bad. But that's mostly due to the fact that Sprite is not that bad. And so, there you go. And speaking of Sprite, though, I do want to mention, Sprite as a deck, just like any variant of Sprite, basically, I'm going to put solidly in tier 2. It is very strong and significantly underrated. Whether that's Sprite Tri-Brigade, Sprite U-Bell, I'm doing this with quotations, because technically speaking, Sprite U-Bell is good. Realistically speaking, it's not the U-Bell stuff. It's just kind of like playing Nightmare Throne to search out the Sacred Beast card. So it's kind of U-Bell, but it's not really. But, like, Live Twin Sprite is good. Sprite in general, very good. Very underrated. It getting Jetback didn't actually matter all that much, but I think just overall, the metagame is not so incredibly above Sprite's level that Sprite can't keep up. So there's that. Next up, Salad. I'm going to put it solidly in tier 3, probably above... Nah, it's below Flunder. It's good. It has, like, solid combos. It can play a bunch of hand traps. It's nice. It's not that great of a deck, though. It loses to things like Maxi, as mentioned previously, obviously. It has some struggle playing into, like... Well, it has major struggle playing into Nibiru, which is not great. And then, on top of that, it's pretty easy to beat its end boards. Unless they do, like, the really off-the-wall, like, over-the-top combo that tends to kind of just be win more, right? Then sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, but for the most part, they're good. More consistent than Kashtira, so therefore, better. Next up, we have Sky Striker, which is just not that great. Like, highly overrated. It's okay. It does stuff. It wins games. Not often, but it does win games. Yeah, I don't know. Sky Striker just seems like such a difficult deck with which to climb. Even with 3 engage, I just genuinely do not see this doing very well. Yes, it plays into, like, Maxi pretty well, but that doesn't really matter if you're playing such a slow game when things like, well, mostly Snake Eyes exist. But even outside of Snake Eyes, you know, Labyrinth is going to have a grand time against that. Rescue Ace is even going to have a good time. Branded doesn't give a shit. Like, most decks just don't care about what this deck is doing. So, there's that. I guess, you know, it's fairly decent against, like, Voiceless Voice. So, yeah. There's that. Next up, we have Snake Eye Fire King, which I am going to solidly put right behind Voiceless Voice. The thing is, the deck's still very, very strong. Right now, best deck in the game. I have more faith in Voiceless Voice. Should I? Probably not, because it's a ritual deck. Ritual decks are terrible. But I still have faith. Sword Soul. I'll put it above Dino. There you go. I don't know what to say about Sword Soul. It just kind of fell off. It doesn't keep up anymore. Having the, like, 2 interactions that it has is just not enough, and it really doesn't have the ability to chew through boards nearly as effectively as it used to. Tearlament is just a top tier deck. Tearlament's just insane. Yeah, that's it. With Kit Kalos, the deck's still very, very strong. Smile. Next up, Unchained. Unchained is still heavily slept on, but that's kind of it. It's solid. It can easily get to to Master 1. I think most people just don't want to play it because 2 reasons. 1, it does take some time, similar to Pearly. And 2, it doesn't really play well into Maxi, so you just kind of have to, like, forego those games. But the thing is, like, it's not bad at climbing. It's just, yeah, occasionally you have to deal with Maxi, and occasionally you don't have the out. But other than that, like, it's a very competent deck. It can chew through boards really efficiently. It's very, very solid. Also, if you do want to play Unchained, play it in Duel Links. It's fantastic in Duel Links, which is very funny. Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul is so overrated. But even with that being said, it's still decent. And then Ubel, again, top tier. Probably here. Ubel is very, very strong. Has the ability to, because of the way that it forces opponents to play, it really can steal some wins pretty effectively going second. Just like, oh, cool, here, you put a big guy onto your field, great, I'm going to put 2 guys onto my field that just walk into your guys and then you die. So that's kind of interesting. It also has the ability to just make Phantom Nightmare, which is such a stupidly overpowered card. So there's that. And then, it's just hyper consistent as well. And it can do the Unchained stuff as well, which is pretty cool. And then Virtual World, which is a deck that exists. I'm also going to actually just move you down here, let's be honest. But yeah, that is it for our tier list. yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know down below if you guys agree or if there's something in particular you don't agree with. Maybe you think that Voiceless Voice is actually going to be a terrible deck and what have you. Maybe you think Sword Soul is actually better than it is, you know? So let me know down below in the comments what you think of the tier list. Obviously, I'm just messing this up at the end for the people who didn't watch the video. So now you have to go back and watch the whole video again to figure out what the actual tier list is. But yeah, I'm just going to keep yapping here for a little bit so that we can get this little picture solidified for the people at the very end to look at it and go, ah, what the fuck? Don't worry, Branded Chimera is a top tier deck. Trust. Same with Vanquishal. This is I just noticed because I wasn't paying attention. I just noticed how scuffed this looks. Oh, it's so funny. I love it. 10 out of 10. Also, Ritual Beast, PogChamp. I'm super excited for when that deck comes out. But yeah, there you go. Are any of these on here notable? No, not really. I will say Snake Eyes Pure is also a deck that you should consider. That deck is still very good. And I say pure, but it's like with the Kashtira cards and stuff like that. But for the most part, still a very good deck. So take a look out for that. But like any Snake Eye variant is pretty good right now. So there you go. But that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did enjoy it. If you did, I like this very much. So appreciate it. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.